National Law Journal and the New York Law Journal, covering legal education issues, and we're talking about what's new in the law schools. You're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, and also over the internet at ncc.edu/WHPC. We'll be back in a moment.
This portion of programming on WHPC is brought to you on behalf of the Nassau County Bar Association, who wants you to know about ADR, Alternate Dispute Resolution, which can help you avoid costly, lengthy, and uncertain litigation in court. By resolving disputes through mediation or arbitration, it gives you control over who decides your case. A mediator helps all parties to reach an agreement they can live with, or an arbitrator selected by the parties hears and decides the case. Your attorney can still represent you, but you control who decides your case. ADR is faster and less stressful than fighting in court, and it is a great way to resolve divorce, employment, or commercial disputes. ADR is now offered through the Nassau County Bar Association. Find out more about how ADR can help resolve your dispute by calling 516-747-4070 or visit nassaubar.org.
Once again, we continue with Law You Should Know. From the Mineola Law Firm of Shane, Dox, Denise, Corker, and Sauer, here is attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome back to Law You Should Know. We're talking about what's new in the law schools, and our guest is Karen Sloan. She's a reporter for the National Law Journal and also the New York Law Journal, covering legal education issues. Karen, in the first part of the program, you were telling us about many of the varied courses and clinics available in the law school, traditional activities that can give a student a very good credential, perhaps to potential employers, like moot court and law review. Are they still popular and all important?
Law review, definitely. Moot court, I think moot court and other extracurriculars to a lesser degree. Law review still is kind of the gold standard for identifying who is at the top of the class. And in terms of like large firms, the ones that pay the really high salaries, being on law review can really make your resume stand out to them.
And what are some other things that a lawsuit can do to stand out if, let's say, they're not on law review?
Sure. I mean, class rank is a big deal to at least big law employers. So getting good grades should be the primary focus of any law student. But also tailoring your law school experience to the kind of job that you want. I mean, if you want to go work for the ACLU or you want to go work for, a white shoe law firm, those are two very different tracks. So I think you need to identify where it is you want to end up and think about how to structure your law school experience so that you're positioning yourself for that job. So let's say you want to go work for the ACLU. Yes, by all means, take clinics, spend your summers working for public interest organizations, demonstrate that you have a commitment to serving the public and that you've done everything you can to pursue that track up to this point.
And aside from the classroom, you also, starting on day one in law school, you want to try to make connections, develop contacts, and do networking. Absolutely.
You cannot overstate the importance of networking in any industry, but especially the legal industry.
And it really starts on day one, not when you're a month away from graduation.
Absolutely. And I think what you'll find is career services offices at law schools are really trying to emphasize that to students really early in their careers. Don't wait until the third year to figure out what you want to do. Really start exploring your aspirations from day one and put yourself on that path.
And in terms for alternate careers or non-traditional careers for law students or lawyers, has that field changed in recent years?
I mean, I honestly feel like you could find a former attorney in every single industry, from, the guy running the food truck to who knows. I mean, there really are, it almost seems endless. You'll find former attorneys everywhere. But there are a few areas where I think are kind of hot growth areas for people who have a law degree but don't necessarily want to practice. So one is in corporate compliance. There are so many, regulations out there that corporations have to follow, and a lot of companies are more comfortable having trained lawyers handling that. I mean, and it's not just corporations. I mean, I've talked to attorneys who work in athletic departments at colleges who are in charge of making sure they comply with all the NCAA regulations. I mean, there really is just a ton of compliance opportunities out there, and lawyers are well positioned for those. I mean, HR, that's kind of an area where sometimes companies like to have lawyers involved. And then there's this whole other industry that's kind of legal services and all these kind of sort of tech startups and different programs that are designed to help lawyers do their jobs. And you find a ton of trained lawyers in, working in e-discovery and software platforms that help lawyers, but they're not actually practicing.
And let's go back to day one. If someone asked you if law is a good field to go into, what would you tell them, or how would you tell them to think about it? My sort of first piece of advice would be to sit down and really think about what lawyers do, figure out what lawyers do, and figure out if that's what you want to do. Because, sitting back and watching Law and Order is not a good reason to go to law school. You like what you see on the TV, and I want to do that. Well, there's a ton of lawyers who never set foot in a courtroom. And you mentioned depression. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I said you just need to, I would talk to lawyers and I would really get a sense of what a day is like for a lawyer before I decided to do that.
And not all lawyers are happy campers, so it's important to do your due diligence before you spend the time and money.
Sure, even before you start applying, I think you have to do some real soul searching to figure out, okay, what is it that lawyers do and is that what I want?
And what kind of setting would you want to do? What about in terms of law school debt? There are different options for law school, some hype, just like there are for college or other advanced education programs. What would you suggest for people in evaluating the debt issue?
Well, cost is one of those things that I would say absolutely before you ever apply, before you ever take the LSAT, sit down and look at how much it actually costs to go to law school. It's an expensive proposition. I think the latest numbers that we have from the ABA are from 2014, but they said that if you go to a public school, on average, you'll graduate with $84,000 in educational debt. And if you go to a private school, it's like $122,000. But it's not uncommon to see people with $200,000 of law school debt. So first, you need to know what you're getting into. But the other thing you need to know is that because fewer people are going to law school right now, schools are really competitive about bringing admittance in, which means that you have more leverage to get scholarships from those schools.
Or some kind of partial scholarship.
You might get it, depending, if you have a high LSAT and good grades, you could get a full ride scholarship. That's not unheard of. But what I would say is if you have offers from multiple law schools, negotiate those scholarships. Because, I'm hearing a lot about admissions offices, offering more money after the fact when somebody comes to them and says, well, this school is offering me this. Can you match it or can you beat it?
And aside from the financial package, what else would you what else should people do in deciding which law school to attend?
I would say don't just look at the U.S. News Law School rankings. You should look at the U.S. News Law School rankings, but that should not be the only factor that you consider. I would look at what each school costs. I would look at their job statistics. There's a couple of websites out there that have really detailed information about the kind of jobs that graduates get. Every year, law schools have to report to the American Bar Association how many of their graduates went into certain types of jobs. So if you know what kind of a job you want, you can go through all these statistics and you can look and see and you can say, okay, hey, Columbia sends a ton of students to those big fancy law firm jobs. Or, Hofstra is sending a lot of students into being solo practitioners, and I really want to be a solo practitioner. It only makes sense to zero in on the schools that are producing the kind of graduate that you want to be.
And I guess it doesn't hurt to speak to students if you go look at the schools, what they like about it and what they think the career prospects are.
Absolutely. Talk to the students, talk to the faculty, tour the campuses, look at the job statistics, look at the costs. There's a lot of factors to take into consideration.
We just have a few minutes left in the program. Are there some websites that could be helpful to people considering law school or who are law students now?
Yeah, there's a couple I would recommend. The American Bar Association actually maintains a really detailed website. It's abarequireddisclosures.org, I believe. And you can pull up any law school that you're interested in, and you can see what their tuition is. You can see what LSAT scores their enrolled students earn, what kind of grades the students that they're enrolling earn. Those are undergraduate grades. You can see their bar pass stats. That's a really important one. You want to go to a school that's getting a lot of students through the bar. They also have detailed information about jobs, what percentage of graduates are getting jobs and what kind of jobs there are. I would also recommend going to an organization called Law School Transparency. They have a really great website that has all this comparative data about student debt and jobs, and you can look at schools individually to evaluate them.
And we just have a moment left. Do you have any final thoughts or suggestions on going to law school in the 21st century?
I mean, I think it can be a really great decision, but it's not the best decision for everybody. I think people just need to be really critical about whether or not it's the right thing to do, because 3 years of your life and $100,000 later, you can't be casual about it. The days of, I don't know what I want to do. I have an English degree and no job, so I'll go to law school. I mean, those days have passed. The stakes are just too high and the costs are too high. So I would say just be really just be really thoughtful about whether or not it's the right decision.
And in 20 seconds, are there any good majors for a college student who's thinking of going to law school someday?
I would say the growth area is get a STEM degree. Law schools and legal employers are just falling all over themselves to enroll and to hire people who have those science, technology, and math backgrounds. It's a huge growth area. And
part depends what area of law you're thinking of going into as well.
Sure. I mean, obviously, patents and intellectual properties is the big one. But, biotechnology, there's just it's a real growth area. Okay. I wish we had some more time, but I would like to thank Karen Sloan for being our guest on Law You Should Know, discussing what's new in the law schools. And, of course, you can read her articles in the National Law Journal and the New York Law Journal. You're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC in Garden City, Long Island, New York, and also over the internet at ncc.edu/WHPC. And you can find podcasts of this program by searching WHPC on iTunes. Please join us next week at this same time for another program on Law You Should Know.